This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? Thanks, guys. Back to you.
It's the big one today, people. The Monday podcast where we review one of the all-timers. Thank God there wasn't a Raw that aired the following night. I don't think my brain would have handled it. You see it in the title. Yes. Today we are taking a look at WWF SummerSlam 1995. A pay-per-view event that should be cast into the furnace and set ablaze. Never to be seen or spoken of again. And we are going to do the full pay-per-view rundown in just a bit here. Before we dive into all the fun, let's get some of the intro plugs out of the way. This is the 5 Starr Wrestling Report. We are here on Mondays and Fridays for new content and new wrestling talk. It's the wrestling podcast nobody knows but everybody needs. And we are sticking to that goofy catchphrase because it sporadically came up a few weeks ago and it stuck. It's stuck like flies to horse dung. It took me 3 years to come up with a clever tagline. I'm proud of that one. At least I can say it's humble and humorous. As always, for the new folks watching, please make sure you hit the subscribe button, like the show for me, and leave a comment. Help support the channel on YouTube and Rumble every week. We cover a lot of ground here, especially all the classic footage we cover. So if you're a fan of previous generations of wrestling, well, this is definitely the channel for you. We do still talk about WWE premium live events. Next week, I think, is their Bombshell in Berlin, or whatever the event's called. We're planning to review that and Retro NXT. We'll actually have a couple weeks where we get to detox from the Retro Raws. Their next show does not air until September 11th because they are preempted over the next couple weeks. So at least we get a good bit of relief in the aftermath of this godforsaken pay-per-view. How do you even prepare for something like this? I didn't know what to do. Friday afternoon, I was like dreading the idea of actually hitting the play button for this thing. I was like, should I try smoking a blunt? Extra caffeinated coffee? Maybe try a scented candle to lower my stress levels? I knew none of it would work. So, I just went with Starbucks instead. Pike. Because you apparently can't get dark roast in the afternoon. That would make too much sense. Why would a coffee joint have dark roast coffee in the afternoon? Anyway, so SummerSlam 95. The pay-per-view we've been dreading since the inception of doing these retro reports. when the year 1995 came along, I said, oh boy, at some point we're going to have to talk about SummerSlam that year. Didn't think the day would finally come, yet here we are. And well, I made it. I made it out alive. I'm sitting here with you right now. I can confidently say, at worst, I may have lost a couple of hairs. You know, it's one of those things where I got done watching it and I was like, is it really as bad as I remember it being? Well, it kind of was, but I don't know. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Don't get me wrong. This pay-per-view sucked. It sucked ass. It blew ass. Do I consider it an all-time terrible pay-per-view? Maybe, maybe not. What standards qualify here? Are we basing it on all-time WWF, WWE events? Or just all-time wrestling events in general? Because I've seen a handful of those AEW pay-per-views. This is like a Christmas gift in comparison to some of those. At least this didn't go on for 5 fucking hours. I know I'm just delaying at this point because I really don't want to talk about this thing. But we got to do it. For science. WWF SummerSlam 1995. From my good old hometown of Pittsburgh, PA. The former, now demolished Civic Center. Or Mellon Arena, if you remember that. Going to see this event live when I was a kid, I remember having fond memories of loathing that fucking main event. The rest of the show was a blur, honestly. Notwithstanding the ladder match. That's a classic, obviously. I don't think anybody would deny that. I still kind of prefer the WrestleMania 10 ladder match with Shawn and Razor over this one. Personal preference, I guess. I mean, you could argue I was a part of history to some degree. I just wish the rest of the pay-per-view would have followed suit. Part of me just kind of wants to skip ahead to the last 2 matches on the card, because when you really boil it down, mostly everything else is forgettable. Take the opener as an example of that. The 1-2-3 Kid versus Hakushi. If you ask any hardcore fan in existence, what was the pay-per-view opener for SummerSlam 1995? Guaranteed nobody would know. It's also ironic because outside the ladder match, it was probably the most exciting match on the entire show. It does kind of symbolize what a lot of modern fans are attentive to these days. The fast-paced athletic spectacles that wow the crowd and get big reactions for all the cool moves. And now by 2024 standards, these kinds of matches have basically turned into Cirque du Soleil bullshit. And there's no psychology to any of the flips or dives we see. You know, at least with these two, it looked like an athletic contest of some description. I mean, the issue here, I think, just kind of boils down to the simple fact that, I mean, no offense to the guy, does anybody actually give a fuck about Hakushi at this point in 1995? I never gave a shit about the guy from day one. Nor did 3/4 of the fucking audience. And this 1-2-3 Kid underdog babyface run, it has long overstayed its welcome by this point. I mean, I've been itching to see that guy turn heel for months now. So while there's technically nothing wrong with what they did here, at the end of the day, who cares? The match had no backstory. Hakushi's been off of television since the fallout to the Brett feud. If they did shoot an angle with him and Waldman, I've never seen the footage air on Raw. The wrestling was good. People dug all the false finishes toward the end. The out-of-nowhere finish was kind of a big middle finger to the crowd. Like, right as Shawn's making his comeback and getting the people into it, Hakushi just catches him midair and drops him over his knee with a backbreaker. Then he pins him flat, 1, 2, 3. I was like, what the fuck? Crowd immediately died after that. I have no idea what the point of putting over Hakushi was here. Again, the gimmick is dead in the water. You know, the 1-2-3 Kid is actually going to be doing a few interesting things with Razor in the coming months. Why not just put him over? I didn't get it. But like we mentioned, does anybody actually remember this match happening? I saw the damn thing live over 20 years ago. I didn't remember a single thing about this match. Granted, I was like 8. But the point remains, it was definitely more exciting than the next match that followed. Before we get to that, though, I did get a good laugh out of King Mabel talking with Doc Hendricks about his game plan for later on. And after Mabel says the big surprise will take place tonight, Hendricks tries to keep talking. Then they immediately cut him off and pitch back to the ring. And even Vince is like, yeah, just keep talking, Doc. You're doing great. So on this Big 4 pay-per-view that they charged full premium price for, they gave us Hunter Hearst Helmsley versus Sparkplug Bob Holly. The equivalent to Triple H versus Hardcore Holly by Attitude Era standards. I don't even think that match would have aired as a dark match on Sunday Night Heat. And these motherfuckers are booking it on a SummerSlam card. It was the battle to see which of the two boring wrestlers was the more boring to watch. You know it's bad when they actively look for an excuse to go to a split screen to show another wrestler walking in the back. Halfway into the snooze fest, we see the British Bulldog storming down the hallway toward the locker room. It lasted maybe all of 15 seconds. Nothing happened. He was just carrying his luggage. Yet it was still far and away more thrilling to watch than anything that happened in this 10-minute match. Oh, and by the way, spoiler, if you're wondering, what was the purpose of Bulldog showing up to the arena? The answer was nothing. We never saw him again. He was not mentioned. He was never heard from or seen. So why did they film this? Beats me. I ain't got a fucking clue. Presumably to set up an angle for Raw, I guess. Where we find out that the British Bulldog was left for dead in the locker room. More to come. By the closing few minutes in the match here, both guys were basically sleepwalking through spots. Couldn't tell if it was a result of them being blown up or if they just stopped giving a shit. Because they realized even the crowd was dead. Either way, Hunter won with a pedigree. I can actually read you back what I wrote down here. It'll take me 5 seconds to recap. Match is boring. British Bulldog split screen. Hunter won with a pedigree. Did that even take 5 seconds? What else do you say about it? They booked Triple fucking H and Bob motherfucking Holly in a singles match on pay-per-view. Given time, you'd be more into watching grass grow in the front lawn. I actually would have had more fun jumping into the Allegheny River like the local firefighters did. They apparently had a tug of war with some of the WWF talent. You will be shocked to hear the fire department lost this challenge. You know who else lost? The fans. For having to sit through the Harris Twins versus the Smoking Guns. Jesus H. Christ. I need to ask an honest question. People, if you are following along in our Retro Raw timeline, you will be able to confirm. Have they bothered to explain how any of these matches have come together so far on the card? I know we typically skip the pay-per-view update from Todd Pettingill. I mean, I can't stand the sight of the guy, so I just move right past them. There's no way any of these three matches have been advertised. The 1-2-3 Kid versus Hakushi. Spark Plug Bob Holly versus Hunter Hearst Helmsley. The Blue Brothers versus the Smoking Fucking Guns. Who in their right mind would pay for this shit? Idiots. Dolts. That's who. Horrible match. Just rotten beyond belief. You know it's bad when the Harris twins are the competent workers involved. I have no idea what the hell Billy Gunn was trying to do here. It looked like he was trying to give one of the Blues Brothers a famouser, but instead of jumping up to try to drive the guy down face first, he just sort of fell on top of the guy with his ass. Then he stood up and looked around, hoping nobody would point out the obvious fuck-up. All I know is I kept begging for somebody to tag in Dirty Dutch so we could at least get a couple moments of good wrestling in this match. Unfortunately, he was stuck on the floor watching this mess unfold. Heat on Billy Gunn forever. Sloppy Bard Gunn comeback. Double collision spot with the heels. Smoking Guns won with their finish. I just want to say this real quick and then we'll move on, I promise. Jim Cornette and I may see eye to eye on a lot of things in wrestling. I would say there's very little that I strongly disagree with him on. Any notion that he has ever put out there that the Harris twins were decent to reasonably good workers, he is dead on balls wrong. This is not an opinion. This is a stated fact. I understand he worked with them. I'm sure they were very friendly gentlemen. They were fucking awful professional wrestlers. Horrible. And it's the Bryan Adams effect with those two juggernauts throughout the 90s. They just wouldn't go away. They were everywhere. in key featured spots on both major wrestling networks for years. What a joke. Oh, God. And speaking of jokes, the way this company handled Chris Candido's run, what a fucking travesty. I mean, it's already bad enough they saddled him with a dead-in-the-water gimmick from day one. But this Barry Horowitz program has been absolute career mutilation. I mean, they've already had Candido job to the guy twice. Of course, that's now made worse by the fact that we literally just saw Horowitz do a job to the 1-2-3 Kid on the Go Home show. Now he's getting his third consecutive clean pinfall over Chris Candido. And I know the guy's name was Skip. It's beside the point. Just, the way they treated Chris here. Truthfully, what do you even say about this match? I'll talk about the finish in a minute here, because, I mean, I didn't remember a fucking thing about how that went down. That was the most random thing I saw in the entire pay-per-view. Obviously, the star of the whole segment was Sunny. We talked about it before. She has her demons. She's rotting in a prison cell somewhere right now. It is what it is. But I can't deny, she was always a natural talent on camera. You know, she did great playing cheerleader for Chris and trying to get herself involved where she could without being overbearing. You know, the spot where she tried to throw in the towel when Barry was beating on Chris's ass, but Hebner would get in her face and tell her to go pound sand. That was kind of funny. Then we had a great spot like a minute later, right before Chris cut off Barry for the heat. There was supposed to be a trip-up spot with Hebner, but it was one of those phantom spots where somebody was out of position for it. So in order for Hebner to not see Sunny tripping Horowitz in the ropes, Hebner basically had to pretend to stumble over his own foot. He looked like such a tool. I mean, in all fairness, the work here was good. It was okay. They tried. You know, it was probably the most they've ever given Chris Candido in terms of dominating a wrestling match before. There was a lot of back and forth toward the end. Candido had multiple visual pins on Barry, but he kept pulling him off the mat. And then right as Candido's going in for the finish, we get a completely arbitrary run-in from, of all people, Hakushi. And presumably, now babyface Hakushi. Why? Yeah, why the hell not? He teases that he's about to form an alliance with Candido, but then he does a springboard leap over the ropes, flies directly over Candido, and then Barry somehow catches Candido in a small package and pins him. So Hakushi costs the Body Dawn as their match because reasons. Because he already wasn't over as a heel. So fuck it, let's try the other way around. Let's book him as a babyface. Meanwhile, they're giving Barry Horowitz the whole pomp and circumcision festival, pumping his fists in the air, hugging Earl Hebner. Of course, none of this does jack shit for Barry Horowitz's career. It was more of just a way to humiliate Sunny and Chris. Make them look like geeks. I mean, I've already ranted about this story. It's not worth going into the same tirade again. The whole thing just sucks. You know, the things they could have done with Chris if they actually gave him a proper chance to let him show what kind of talent he truly was. Not in Vince's world. No, to Vincent K. McMahon, he was a comedy clown. The story of every failed WWF gimmick in the mid-90s. Man, I was so pissed off about that match. I couldn't even find anything remotely good to say about the Dean Douglas report card skit. I just wrote down, "Not today, Dean." Although he did hit the nail on the head when he was recapping the Horowitz skip match. He indeed called it a travesty. Bingo. Right on the money, sir. It was indeed a travesty. And boy, those hits just keep on coming with this humdinger, don't they? The Women's Championship match. Oh yeah, did I mention? Yeah, that division still exists. How easy to forget, since the whole division consists of Alundra Blaze and whatever heel of the month she happens to be challenging. I'd forgotten all about Bertha Faye until I saw her on camera here. Her and Harvey Whippleman standing in the ring looking like two circus clowns. And for those that may be wondering, why is Harvey managing Bertha Faye? The short answer is because they were paying the guy money to be the most useless manager in wrestling history. So why not stick him with the woman we've barely seen on TV since she made her debut months ago? God. I mean, I'd almost forgotten that Bertha broke Alundra Blaze's nose the night she debuted. Dropping her fat ass right over Alundra's face. Damn near killed the woman. There was one highlight in this entire segment, and that was Jerry Lawler's comment about Bertha's physique, noting that she had buns of cinnamon as opposed to buns of steel. Get it? Because she's fat. So yeah, they wrestled for maybe 3 minutes. It was god-awful for about 2 of those 3 minutes. Alundra did everything she possibly could to make it watchable. Of course, she's in there working with the equivalent to a walking refrigerator, so what the hell is she supposed to do? She went after Harvey on the floor, got a couple of hold spots on Bertha, but Bertha just gave her a sit-out powerbomb and pinned her flat. No setup. She just grabbed her, scooped her up, planted her. 1, 2, 3. I mean, even Vince sold it like, oh, well, that was shocking. With about that level of emotion, too. And the minute they handed Bertha that hideous pink belt, started having flashbacks to that Butterfly Divas belt they used to have on WWE back in the day. Talk about PTSD. The only thing that remotely saved this was the interview segment JR tried to conduct with Harvey afterwards. Harvey's trying to rip into JR for being a peeping Tom, checking out Bertha's goods. JR just nonchalantly goes, "I'm a happily married man, Harvey." Jim is a good man. He has standards. So, where are we now? 5 matches into this fucking fiasco. If we did star ratings, which we don't, I don't think any of these matches would have surpassed a 1.5 stars. And we were still a little under halfway through the actual pay-per-view, which infuriated me. At least when it came to the Undertaker-Kama casket match, this I can at least say had a backstory of some description. one that has been going on since WrestleMania. No, it has not been a very intriguing story, but it is a story. Kama stole Taker's urn, melted it down into a necklace, and ever since that point, the $1 Million Corporation's been a thorn in Taker's side, up to and including the angle where Kama took out one of Undertaker's creatures of the night. I know I say that with a straight face. None of that is me being facetious. That is part of the story. They have been feuding over a fake necklace. It's also been kind of a weird thing where apparently they've been doing a series of casket matches on earlier shows, most of which have been recorded as dark matches. But I thought it was really strange. It's like they were going out of their way to practice how to put together these matches for Kama's sake. I don't really know if the casket stipulation was ever explained prior on TV. You know, it was just, hey, these guys are going to have a casket match, because why not? It's Undertaker's shtick. He likes to bury people. I mean, I think your judgment or review of this match kind of boils down to the simple fact of, A, do you have an emotional attachment to Undertaker's beef with the $1 Million Corporation? Or B, do you have a strong emotional attachment to coffin matches? For me, the answer is no on both accounts. I mean, look, you all know I'm a big Taker mark. I've beaten that horse to death. As a match, I think I would accurately say, if I'm being fair, they try to take a 10-minute match and stretch it out to about 20. Now, how you judge that, that's your prerogative. Good thing, bad thing. I don't know. I mean, Kama just beat and beat and beat and beat and beat and beat and beat on The Undertaker forever. And I'm not even necessarily criticizing the heat factor of it. I mean, by far the best part of the exchange was when Paul Bearer took off his jacket and tried to chase Ted DiBiase around ringside. That got one of the biggest pops in the entire match. But then you look at the action. You know, Kama's in there working over The Undertaker for like 10 minutes straight. It's not necessarily exciting because The Undertaker's not a natural seller. So there's a lot of downtime. A couple spots where both guys were brawling on top of the casket seemingly for an eternity. I did laugh at the one spot where both guys actually took a bump into the casket. And of course, the running theme throughout the whole match was the coffin cam. Anytime somebody got dumped in the casket or was on the precipice of going into it, they would cut to the floor cam shot and then show somebody falling into the coffin. The best part was when both guys fell inside of it and the lid shut on top of them. Of course, the rest are standing there shrugging their shoulders like, well, I guess the match has to continue. There must be a winner here. Even though both guys were already inside the coffin. So by all accounts, the match should have been over. But the funny part, right after they both fell in, the top part of the casket lid broke. So there's this giant purple panel flopping around while Kama and Undertaker are trying to fight to get out of the casket. It looks so Bush League. And of course, they do more teases where one guy gets tossed in, but, you know, they can't shut the lid in time. Finally, Taker makes his comeback. He chokeslams Kama. Then he spends like a full minute milking the dramatic tombstone finish. Then Taker rolled Kama's dead body into the casket and closed the lid to win. fairly satisfying payoff to a feud that's been pretty on and off since WrestleMania. I'm not going to say they tore the house down here, but again, it wasn't awful. Casket matches are my thing. They never have been. Even the ones Taker was involved with. The ones with Yokozuna worked better because, the whole story of the match is that Yoko was deathly afraid of caskets and wanted nothing to do with them. There were a couple spots here where Kama got all freaked out when he was inside the coffin, but it wasn't really a factor into the story of the match. They just kind of worked it like a regular grudge match, but there was a casket involved. Taker winning wasn't surprising. I'm pretty sure he's about to re-enter his feud with Mabel after this. And that's where I think Mabel actually breaks Taker's face and damn near kills the guy. So it wasn't exactly smooth sailing for Taker's career after this moment. But we will come to that very, very soon. For now, why don't we go ahead and talk about Undertaker's kayfabe brother before he became Undertaker's kayfabe brother. It is time for the in-ring debut of Isaac Yankem. Dr. Isaac Yankem. I stand corrected. I had totally forgotten that Glenn's music during this time was just generic drilling noises. Holy fuck, that was annoying. If there ever was a compilation of all-time horrible wrestling theme music, put Isaac Yankem right at the top of that list, bro. That was worse than the Right to Censor music. So, Isaac Yankem versus Bret Hart. I still can't believe this is what they had Bret doing in 1995. If I am being generous, I would say that Bret was carrying Glenn Jacobs in this match. In the hypothetical sense, obviously. And because I have great respect for the work Glenn's done throughout his career, I'm not going to completely shit on his performance. Even though, objectively speaking, it really wasn't all that good. I will say, though, not to jump too far ahead, but there was one very impressive spot that Glenn pulled off here. A springboard leg drop. I don't think I've ever seen him do that before. He pulled that off. I was like, okay, that was really damn cool. Like the top rope clothesline I used to think was impressive for a big guy. But a springboard leg drop for a 300-plus pounder. Innovative. They also tried the Magnum TA Boris Zirkov hangman spot here like we saw in Mid-South a couple weeks ago. Only here it didn't take him 3 attempts to pull it off. So yes, we can accurately say this. Isaac Yankem. He was much better than Boris Zirkov. Write that one down. Now again, they had to do a lot of smoke and mirrors just to kind of gloss over Glenn's level of experience. Bret controlled a lot of the offense at the beginning, which kind of looked awkward because he was going a little fast for Glenn to keep up. But once Glenn slowed it down and took control, it gave him a chance to learn pacing and not to try to do so much, milk the bigger moments. I guess my overall issue kind of boils down to this. Okay, so you clearly have to get Lawler involved here to advance the story. But there were like 5 moments during this thing where the ref should have audibly called for a DQ. Lawler's out there basically holding Bret down so Yankem can stay on the advantage. The ref's looking right at him. I'm like, how is this not an automatic disqualification? Like the deal where he's openly holding Bret's leg to avoid letting him get back in the ring. Meanwhile, the ref's like, hey, go sit down at the desk. How about you fucking eject the guy from ringside? That'll solve the issue. So what ends up happening, after Lawler had already interfered for like a 17th time in a row, the heels trap Bret in the ropes by his neck, basically a modified hangman's position, and while they're fake choking him in the ropes, because they literally have to make sure they don't accidentally tug on the guy too hard, otherwise they'll kill him, they eventually send out reinforcement to break up the attack, and they do manage to free Bret. So Bret goes over via DQ, but at the same time, they make sure Glenn doesn't have to do a job here in the process. So, in the grand scheme of things, was the match terrible? No, not really. Was it something I would have put on a pay-per-view and had go over 10 minutes? Probably not. Glenn did not look great here. We just need to call it like it is. But, because he was working with Bret, I think they were able to mask a lot of his deficiencies for being so new to the business. So that's more of a credit to Bret's skill than anything. I always talk about how I never really appreciated how truly great Bret Hart was as a kid. Mostly because I was still hung up on the dry personality. I just never found him that enjoyable to watch as an on-screen personality. But man, the older I get, he really had an unmatched talent when it came to the way he structured his matches. Knowing what he was up against here, I think he and Glenn had the best possible match they could have possibly had given the circumstance. Is that a compliment? I would say so. Maybe not the thing Bret Hart fans would want to hear. But I'm just giving it to you straight. And, this Bret Hart-Jerry Lawler feud has been so tedious to get through. And like the fact that we never actually saw these two in any kind of meaningful blow-off where Bret gets his win. It really makes you wonder if they called an audible after this and said, fuck it, just move Bret onto the title picture after this, because this feud has long overstayed its welcome. And that's basically what they did. At least by the time Survivor Series comes around. But when it comes to SummerSlam 95, again, there's one match on this thing that stands the test of time. The match everybody remembers on this card for being an all-time classic. And I certainly won't dispute the fact that it was hands down the single best match on the card without question. Absolute match of the year candidate. The Intercontinental Championship ladder match with Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon. The WrestleMania 10 rematch. And of course, we can debate for hours which one was the better match. WrestleMania 10 versus SummerSlam 95. It's all semantics. I mentioned in the lead up to this match, this feud has been so cold for the last year because they basically dropped the program after last year's WrestleMania match. And then without really giving it a chance to heat up again on TV, they sort of just jump back in with both feet. Then one week they announce, hey, these guys are going to have a ladder match again. Why? Well, because the first one was really damn good. So why not do it again? The other thing here is that you have to factor in that both guys are still technically babyfaces at this point, even though Razor ended up working more as the heel in this match. There were definitely more big bumps and cringeworthy moments as I was watching. Spots where I winced and thought somebody either died or broke a body limb. Maybe that's why it gets higher praise in the WrestleMania match, because in the first one, they were kind of playing it more safe. They weren't really going for the spectacle of all the big bumps and everything like that. And like, I mean, I know I shouldn't laugh, but because I know the guy survived, I can rewatch it and have a good laugh about it. Like the spot where Razor gives Shawn the elevated suplex over the ring out to the floor, and Shawn's lower leg collides with the guardrail. I mean, on top of the fact that the announcers immediately sold it like the guy was dead, Vince's intonation was priceless. Doc Hendricks is going crazy. He's like, oh, that's got to be it. There's no way he gets up from that. Vince just goes, yes, it is. It is over. Like, even Vince was convinced the guy was dead. And then when he sees Shawn stirring, he's like, oh, wait, he's still moving. He's still moving. Definitely confirming that statement. Then you hear the one guy in the crowd yell to Razor, do it again! That did not help my composure. I mean, there's so many great moments in this thing. It's virtually impossible to go bullet point by bullet point without spending an hour talking about it. The big thing that always stands out to me looking back at this match, the attention to detail when it comes to replaying spots from the WrestleMania 10 match. You know, simple things like Razor avoiding the shotgun dropkick from Shawn when he tries to slide the ladder into the ring. Those kinds of things stand out. Shawn missing the big body splash on Razor during their critical comeback. I had almost completely forgotten how anti-Shawn the Pittsburgh crowd was. God, they couldn't stand this guy even back then. They saw that artificial babyface run for what it was. They were super pro Razor here. Which made the heat part so funny. Like Razor's just being a dick working over Shawn's knee. Crowd's like, yeah, kick his ass, Razor. Put him in a wheelchair. And that kind of was the central focus of the match. Razor working over Shawn's knee and trying to prevent him from climbing the ladder. Even though it really didn't factor into the finish well. But there was at least a balance here between the big bumps versus the art of selling the big drama of all the spots. Slowing things down, letting Razor actually work over Shawn. God, isn't it amazing? The fact that these guys could basically have 2 classic ladder matches in back-to-back years by simply utilizing one fucking ladder. And not 17. Plus tables and chairs and whatever other furniture they could rack up. I mean, there are ways you can do car wreck matches and still make them look believable without resorting to nonstop jackass stunts for 20 minutes. And granted, they did kind of kill the ladder stipulation when Razor brought out the second ladder from under the ring. Again, also setting a bad precedent for future generations. But again, it all goes back to the conversation of how you compare classic ladder matches to the ones we see today. Where they're all the same. There's no variety. You know, it's not about the struggle of seeing 2 guys fight through pain or exhaustion to grab a gimmick that's hanging over the ring. Nowadays, it's about, what dumbass spot can I pull off that'll pop the crowd and make them all cheer for me? This is when the chemistry of ladder matches actually worked. Because you had 2 guys that were actively fighting for something. There was an objective. There was a goal. And you could tell they were actually trying to obtain it. And I think that's why this match works so well and why people look back at it with such fond memory. You know, we remember the spectacle of the first ladder match because it was on the big stage. It was a contest between 2 very gifted performers that had natural chemistry together. But the second ladder match was their chance to try different things, to work a completely different story than the first one. And because Shawn was technically still a heel during the early to mid part of 94, it changed the landscape of how he worked in this match. Yeah, he did the big flashy aerial stuff in the WrestleMania 10 match, but not like some of the stuff he pulled off here. And again, the drama where both guys are fatigued and exhausted at the end. You get the critical moment where Razor gets backdropped out to the floor. Shawn's struggling to climb up that ladder and grab the bell while he has the ring all to himself. And you know, I watched this footage back years later. I still never knew if it was an original plan or if it was just a fuck up on Shawn's part. He tries to grab the belt, but his hand slips, and you see Shawn just fall off the ladder and take this massive bump. The only reason I think it was a legit fuck up is that Shawn immediately got back up and started throwing a temper tantrum. That he climbed the ladder like 3 seconds later and grabbed the belt anyway. But the end result was exactly what it needed to be. Razor teasing that he was going to clock Shawn with the belt afterwards, but then he gives it to him and raises his hand. You know, it put into perspective that, yeah, these guys had a grudge, but they were professionals afterwards. Shawn was the better man. Razor accepted it. And it still keeps him as a babyface in the eyes of the people. I don't know if I really agree with them doing the show of respect less than a minute later after we just saw these guys trying to cripple one another. I mean, if this were real, I hate using that cliche, but I mean, the idea that Razor was being a raging douchebag during the key moments of the match, then he just shook Shawn's hand afterwards like, yeah, never mind me trying to destroy your knee. It was all in good faith, brother. All in good faith. And then again, it closes another chapter in the long-term series these two had. Shawn gets the nod, which is obviously setting up for the track to WrestleMania next year. And Razor goes on to feud with other guys, including Goldust once he comes into the picture. Sean Waltman as well, I believe. And he's still active until he leaves for WCW in May of the following year. But, you know, I think in the scope of things, is it fair to say this is Razor's last real great WWF match? Because 96 wasn't really a banner year for his career right before he left for Nitro. As we will soon learn. But for now, it is time to talk about the match that really burned the house down. If you thought the ladder match was a banger, wait until you get a hold of this main event, dude. A 5-star classic if there ever was one. For the WWF Championship, King Mabel challenging Diesel. Hell yeah. A main event pay-per-view caliber match if there ever was one. Am I doing an effective job with my embellishment? I'm trying, folks. There is a special place in hell reserved for Vincent K. McMahon for ever perpetrating this fucking abortion to the public. Boinking in turns my ass, dude. That is nothing compared to putting the fans through this debacle. Of all the horrible shit Vince is responsible for, this is at the top of the list. It's boinking in turns in number 2 and then booking this calamity of a main event. Mabel versus Diesel. And the simple fact that this still went less than 10 minutes in overall runtime, that should really tell you something right there, how bad it was. I mean, beyond it being slow and plodding, The crowd is absolutely dead. You know, they just get done seeing that amazing spectacle of a ladder match. And they turn around and see this garbage. Diesel was actually trying for once in his godforsaken life. Probably because even he knew what the shitstorm was he was dealing with. And again, the real talking point is everything that happened with the chaos at the end. After Hebner got bumped, we get interference from Mo and Lex Luger, respectively. It is the worst run-in attempt I've ever seen from an alleged babyface. Luger hits the ring, immediately gets taken out by Diesel. Because again, he's under the assumption that he's still in Davey Boy's back pocket. Nope. Turns out Luger was nothing more than a defective babyface. After Diesel had sent him out to the floor, Luger gets right back up, brawls with Mo to the back, and then they were gone. So Luger's a goddamn idiot. Good thing he leaves the company after this fucking fiasco. Because I'm pretty sure they already had taped the 6-man for Raw he's involved with. I think this was legitimately the very last thing he did in the WWF before he walked out. What a proper send-off. So Mabel gives Nash a belly-to-belly for a near fall. Ends up missing a big splash from the middle rope where he still ends up connecting with Diesel's face. So I'm sure he was pissed. And then Diesel catches Mabel with a short arm clothesline from the middle rope and gets the pin. After Mabel had nearly rolled on top of Hebner and squashed him like a bug. So yeah, that was a disaster. And they were edging to get off that pay-per-view feed as quickly as possible after that. So they really must have been running short on pay-per-view time. Because it was like, Diesel wins, 30 seconds of pyro, immediate fade to black. And that basically closed the chapter on Mabel's main event career. No more title shots for him. In fact, he's basically gone from the WWF by sometime in late 95, isn't he? I mean, they do the feud with him and Taker. After he breaks Taker's orbital bone. They do a match where I think Taker gets his win back. Mabel obviously has a lot of heat with the locker room after that. And then he's just gone. Of course, he comes back a few years later as Viscera when WWF was doing the whole Ministry of Darkness thing. Which is a whole other can of worms that we have to open up at some point. But, yeah, not a great showing. Not a great showing at all. I mean, when you really get down to brass tacks, this pay-per-view is merely saved by one match. It's a sea of horribly uneventful underneath matches, a moderately decent casket match, a passable match with Bret Hart and Glenn Jacobs, a fantastic ladder match with Shawn and Razor that everybody raves about to this day, and whatever in the fuck that main event was supposed to be. That was SummerSlam 95. I absolutely hated that show when I was a kid. The only exception being the ladder match. And I even remember leaving that Civic Arena that night thinking, God, that was a horrible last match. A mere 8 years old I was. And I could tell you how much Diesel and Mabel sucked. Imagine if you were a Smart fan watching in 95. Holy Christ. I'm actually curious what Dave Meltzer gave that as a star rating. It had to have been in the minus star range. There's no way he was stupid enough to give that a dud. That was an honest-to-God negative star match. There was not a single redeeming quality about it. But we made it through. I didn't think it was possible. We lived to fight another day in the torture chamber that was WWF's 1995 library. 4 more months. 4 more months. And we get to put that year behind us and move on to 96, which, I mean, it was mostly another bad year for the WWF financially. But it is where you start to see things turn around just a bit. Now that Vince is picking up on the fact that Nitro is an actual threat to his product. I mean, even at this point, dude, he was so out of touch. Hopelessly out of touch. And you just couldn't talk him out of it. All right. So where are we at with this NXT timeline? Well, I know we're coming up on the TakeOver special. Still got a couple more weeks. I do know the announcers were super energetic this week. They were even going as far as to let us know it's going to be a big one. And they actually got me excited for a brief moment there. Then I realized it's the NXT announce team. And they're all a bunch of morons. And of course, they make this comment as we're getting set for an Ascension squash. And it's every God-blessed Ascension match we've ever reviewed since the beginning. They wrestle 2 geeks. The crowd marks out for them and chants "Yah," despite the fact that they're supposed to be heels. And they win with their finish. It was so paint by numbers, I didn't even bother writing anything down about this segment. With the exception of one thing. When Alex Riley tried with a straight face to imply that the Ascension had been on such a reign of terror, they may have surpassed The Shield in terms of all-time dominance. I can respond to that in short. No. No, they were not on the Shield's level of a dominant team. Even the Raging Oil Mechanic was a bigger star than these 2 jabronis. You know, the sad thing is Riley was probably legitimately serious. He actually thought people wouldn't give him pushback for making such a dumbass comment. Well, he was wrong. And then we got the reveal of NXT's newest general manager. They really rolled the red carpet out for this guy, didn't they? They come back from break. JoJo is standing in the ring. She simply goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, the new NXT general manager." There is a slight pause. And then they play William Regal's music. I mean, they may as well have had the guy walk out stepping on whoopee cushions. What a popcorn fart setup. Think about that. This is how they revealed the guy that was basically going to oversee the product for the next 8 or so years. Until the rebrand. This was the man in charge. The on-screen GM that ran the show, booked matches, made all the decisions. They just had him saunter out to the ring with Pete in hand. How anticlimactic can you get? I mean, at least they were kind enough to play the guy's theme music. So out comes Mr. Regal, and he takes a moment to thank the people and talk about how he's seen the growth of NXT from the very beginning, and he's proud to represent the hottest brand on the market today. And his first objective as active GM is to announce the main event for TakeOver in 2 weeks. So he calls Adrian Neville down. And my God, this poor Neville. That New England accent was the death of him as an on-screen babyface. He could wow the people onto their feet with all the amazing athletic stuff he did. But you put a live mic in front of that guy's face and let him speak. Train wreck city, brother. His very first sentence is to congratulate Regal on becoming the new active GM, to which half the crowd responds by going, "What?" And it absolutely buried Neville's promo. He's trying to be the white meat super pro company babyface, standing out there in a well-fitted suit, holding the NXT belt over his shoulder like a proud man. Crowd is totally giving the guy shit. So after he steals Goldberg's catchphrase and asks Regal, "Who's next?" we are soon interrupted by Tyson Kidd, Tyler Breeze, and Sami Zayn respectively. And they're all out there pleading their case as to why they should be granted the title shot. It's very WWE-like in terms of how it's structured. Everybody gets their own music queued up. They all patiently wait their turn to speak. It's just very watered down and immaculate. I mean, there's nothing raw about the delivery of anything. I guess Breeze had a good line when he said, "Everyone deserves a title shot ahead of Tyson Kidd, including his wife." That at least got a pop out of the crowd. But the long and short of it, Neville wanted to voice his opinion. He wanted to pick his opponent, or opponents, as we found out. He wants all three of these guys in the ring at the same time. Because you see, Adrian Neville is a stupid-ass motherfucking babyface. At least that was the opinion I garnered out of all this. I mean, no, think about it for a sec. Why would Neville voluntarily put up his belt against three other guys when he doesn't have to? Even Regal was like, well, it's not really the plan I had in mind. But hey, less work for me. Fatal four-way it is, brother. And the thing that's astonishing, I knew this was the main event for the September TakeOver. I mean, I've spoiled that for the last 2 months. I know it's a four-way. But even when they made it official here, I was like, wow, that was really goddamn stupid. There was no qualifier. Neville just told the GM, book them all in a match with me. I'll wrestle every single one of them. Instead of maybe letting Regal book Sammy, Tyler, and Tyson in a three-way with the winner getting the title shot. You know, that way Neville at least has a 50% chance to retain his belt. Now he is actively putting himself in a position where he'll have a 25% chance of retaining the belt. So again, either Adrian Neville's a cocky little elf-looking bastard, or he's a flat-out idiot. Guess we'll have to see what the long-term game is for his character on TV. He's got to be turning heel soon, right? I mean, the crowd is all but begging for it. You know, at this rate, they may as well just flip him heel. How's it going to hurt him any? I mean, it only makes sense. Because the plan eventually is to put the strap on Sammy. And I think he's the one that ends up beating Neville. But I don't think that happens until the next TakeOver special. Not the September one, but the one that follows. Because that's right before Kevin Owens shows up. I could be remembering all this wrong. It has been 10 years. He also made the announcement after break, Regal that is. The main event for the show was Tyson and Tyler against Sammy and Adrian. Because apparently Regal prepared ahead of time and said, where can I get some great ideas for matches? I know. I'll go straight to the Teddy Long playbook. We'll book him in a tag team match, playa. And it was still a more brilliant idea than them doing Sasha Banks and Bayley in another fucking goddamn match. Is this legit? They're not trying to rib me here. How many fucking matches have these two had? We've been reviewing NXT TV for, what, almost a full year now? 10 months? 11 months? How many Bayley versus Sasha Banks matches have they booked in that 10-month window? It has to be at least a dozen. This really is the female equivalent to John Cena versus Randy Orton. Just having him do match after match after match after match after match after match, month after month after month after month after month. Who could possibly care? I'm so done watching these two even look across the ring from each other. Bayley won with a belly-to-belly. I fast-forwarded like 10 minutes. Didn't look remotely interesting when I was scrolling through the timeline. And of course, it set up the post-match with Renee and Bayley, where Renee asks, what would it mean for you to become NXT Women's Champion at TakeOver? And so Bayley goes into her happy-go-lucky, super white-meat babyface verbiage. She's talking about how she's prepared for this moment since the day she walked in the door of NXT. She's talking about every childhood poster that the kids have hanging in their bedroom wall that reads, hang in there. And that's what Bayley's done. She's hung in there. Bayley is super proud about hanging with the top names in the industry. Good Lord. I mean, she seriously is the only personality that could have ever pulled off this gimmick. God bless her. Takes a real amount of believability and skill because her character is such a dork. Give any other person on that roster Bayley's gimmick, it would have sunk like the Titanic. Sasha Banks? Oh, good God, no. She'd have fucking bombed as a white meat babyface. I mean, you'd have to be a complete numbskull to think Sasha Banks would ever get over as a likable character. You'd have to be the worst booker on planet Earth to trot that idea out to the public sphere. Right? Right? So Charlotte interrupted and basically told Bayley to give up on everything. Stick to hugs. She warned Bayley that she's not ready to be champ. She's walking into a fight she's not prepared for. Bayley told Charlotte, again with a straight face, I don't even want a hug. To which the crowd all went, ooh. And then she tried to wish Charlotte luck and shake her hand. Charlotte turned her back and left. So Bayley stood up to the alleged bully here. That I think is going to come back to bite her in the ass. Hey, you know what? At least they're making Charlotte the heel. It's more relatable than seeing her walk around smiling and pretending to be a congenial personality. Nothing about Charlotte is remotely congenial. And if you don't believe me, ask the fucking WWE audience for the better part of the last 10 years. So after about 5 minutes of wasted infomercial time, Bull Dempsey came out and beat the shit out of Angelo Dawkins. And you know, I almost felt pity for Angelo here. But then I saw him come out dressed like a middle school nerd with a backpack, and I said, nope. I'm good with Bull kicking this guy's ass. He went over with a bulldozer. And then they tried to follow that with a borderline incomprehensible Legionnaires promo. I had virtually no clue what these marble mouths were trying to say. All I know is I laughed at the idea of Sylvester Lefort trying to pronounce the word hair. I actually had to rewind it and make sure he wasn't trying to say the word yeah. I heard him say that Enzo tried to challenge him to a yeah versus yeah match. I was like, what the hell is a yeah match? Is LA Knight sponsoring this thing? He meant hair versus hair. And then we had the tag team main event of Tyson and Tyler versus Sammy and Adrian. Did you ever stop and think for a minute that if you just use everybody's first name in this equation, it sounds like you're announcing a fight behind the school playground? Tyson and Tyler versus Sammy and Adrian. Those are the names they settled with for these guys. There's nothing masculine about any of their first names. But before I talk about the match, I had to point out this legendary train wreck moment on commentary. As the announcers are talking about the four-way and all the potential outcomes of what would happen during certain pinfall scenarios, I swear to God, Matt Bloom made it sound like he's never heard of a multi-man match in his entire life. He's like strategically trying to think it over in his head. He's like, wait a second. So if Adrian pins Tyler Breeze, well then, Adrian retains the belt. But if Tyson pins Tyler Breeze, but by God, you're telling me Tyson becomes the new champion? Yes, Matt. Yes, that would be correct. I'm a little confused that you've never heard about the effective outcomes of multi-person matches. As if you've never been part of one in your entire career. I mean, they had a fine match here. Wasn't great, but they set up some good story fallout for the TakeOver special at the end. You had the babyfaces running wild early on, working very cohesively. The heels cut off Neville and worked him over so Zayn could eventually make the hot tag at the end. And then, things kind of spiral out of control when all four guys are doing spots. First, there was a miscue where Breeze knocked Kid out to the floor. Then Neville tried to set up Breeze in the corner for the Red Arrow. But as Breeze crotched Neville on the top rope, Sammy tried to charge and hit the haluva kick on Breeze. But instead he accidentally hit Neville. Then a minute after that, Tyson Kidd tries to blind tag Breeze so he can steal the pin. And those two get into an argument. And it basically ends with Tyson shoving Breeze into Zayn. And then Tyson stole the pin on Neville. Lot of names there. Probably didn't make a lick of sense when I read it back. Trust me, it all happened. I'm not making any of that up. The story here was everybody worked perfectly fine until the end when the miscues started happening. And in the case of the heels, a lot of it was intentional. Zayn accidentally pump kicking Neville in the head. That was definitely inadvertent. And of course, Tyson getting the win over Neville here, that was a big feather in his cap. because he's been looking for that victory since the last TakeOver special when he lost to Neville for the belt. So that was definitely cathartic. Even though he didn't win the belt here, he just got his win back. But the big takeaway at the end was Zayn coming back and kicking Tyson to lay him out. And then Zayn got to hold up the NXT strap while everybody was strewn about the ring. Critical error on Sammy's part, though. Should not be putting your hands on that belt when you're not the champion yet. That's a bad omen, brother. That's like black magic right there. You know, a lot of the show is mainly geared toward pushing the four-way. And I know we still got a couple more weeks before TakeOver, but, you know, the tag match itself, it seemed very hasty in terms of setup. Like, Regal just announced the four-way at the top of the show. Then less than 5 minutes later, he's in a backstage pre-tape announcing the tag match for the main event. I don't know, you maybe could have spread that out over the next couple weeks. But the angles at the end were good cliffhangers. You know, now we see how everybody responds to the chaos of everybody getting in each other's way here. I still think Neville's a dope for voluntarily asking for the four-way, but I guess you can make the argument he's a fighting champion. It's probably giving him a little too much credit. But that rounds out this one here, folks. Next week, it is the Bash of the Berlin. And then Retro NXT as well. So we'll have a similar layout and format to what we have here. Retro Raw will resume in a couple of weeks. And then we'll get back to regular formatting there. Thanks, everybody, for watching. As always, make sure you subscribe, comment, like the show, and I'll catch you guys all soon. Peace out.